Me
Well,
too.
welcome. I know. I'm so excited to be here with you today. Let's go ahead here and we are going to get started. My name is Hasmeen. I am actually a children's librarian with the San Antonio Public Library, and it is my honor to be able to moderate the Let's Get Frozen session with three amazing middle grade and YA authors. We've got Kamilla Benko with us. We have Mari Mancusi and Jen Calanita. So we're really excited to have them here. A little bit about me before we get started. Like I said, I've been a children's librarian for 8 years here in San Antonio. I write reviews for some of the books that are in the San Antonio Public Library collections on our children's blog. And I'm a huge Star Trek and Disney nerd. So this is like a dream come true to be taking Disney with three other people that also love Disney. And then, like I said, we have amazing authors with us. We have Kamilla Benko here, and she is actually the USA Today bestselling author of Frozen 2, The Forest of Shadows, which I have right over here. And she also wrote the Unicorn Quest trilogy. Oh, you got it nice close up. Excellent. Yeah, the Unicorn Quest. I know, it's very exciting. She spent most of her childhood climbing into wardrobes and trying to step through mirrors and plotting to run away to an art museum. And now she visits other worlds as an author. She's originally from Indiana, and she's now, I think, splitting her time between New York City and Indiana. I think you're in Indiana at the moment, right? And I think you still have full bookshelves, your teapot, and probably hiking boots. And now, all of them now in Indiana, right? And you have a new addition, right? You just had a little baby girl, or little baby. I don't know if it's a girl.
A little baby girl, and her name is Yelena.
Well, congratulations. So that's wonderful. And then we also have Mari Mancusi with us today. And Mari is an Emmy Award-winning former TV news producer and an author of Disney books. Her Frozen prequel is called Dangerous Secrets, which I don't know if she has it, but I've got it right here. Yes, right here. Which actually tells the backstory of Elsa and Anna's parents. And that was released, I think, last year in 2020. Yeah. And then she's also published more than 24 sci-fi and fantasy novels for kids, for teens, for adults. She kind of does it all, including the Dragonauts. Yep. And then she also has the Camelot Code series. Yeah. And then you also wrote a Scorch series a few years back too, which is also about dragons, which I really liked. So that one was really cool. And then you also write interactive fiction games for a popular mobile gaming app, which is interesting. I've never done that before, so I'm excited to kind of go dig around for that. And in addition to writing, Mari is an avid cosplayer, a traveler in the pre-COVID times, I'm sure, and looking forward to post-COVID. And she is a gamer, and she lives here nearby in Austin with her husband and young daughter. So welcome, Mari. So glad you're here.
Yeah.
And last but not least is we have Jen Calanita with us today. And Jen, you are a former entertainment interviewer, is that correct? Like journalist.
Yeah.
Who interviewed people like Zac Efron and Justin Timberlake. And now you're writing children's books. So that's quite the career change, which is amazing for us. And that's so cool. She is the author of Disney Twisted Tale books. You've written Mirror, Mirror. And then this one, Conceal, Don't Feel. And if I'm not mistaken, I think you have a new one out, right? About Hercules?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep,
so
which is now your
came out this week.
Yeah, which is now I think your 30th book that you have written, correct? I know. Congratulations. That's awesome. But you also write another fairy tale series, right? The Fairy Tale Reform School, which I read, and I really enjoyed that one. That one is more in the juvenile fiction books that I usually read, is not quite the YA. So YA is a little bit of a stretch for me. But I'm glad that all of you are here. And I'm really excited to be talking to you guys about Frozen. So, you guys ready to get started with some questions? All right.
Definitely.
So, one of the things that I read when I got to be moderator of this, I thought, how did these ladies start writing for Disney? Like, how does that process happen? Like, do you get a call from Disney saying, hey, are you going to write for us? Do you like submit book submissions? Like, hey, I've got an idea, Disney, please call me. How does that work? And then, like, what made you want to write for Disney? And in particular, Frozen. What inspired you to write for Disney? And I thought maybe, Jen, since you've got a few of those under your belt, that you could start us off, kind of how you got this process started with Disney.
For me, every book has an author bio in the back. And my author bio for the Fairy Tale Reform School books always said Jen wants to kick Cinderella out of the castle at Walt Disney World and move in. And so an editor at Disney saw, she writes fairy tales, she likes fairy tales, she loves Disney, which I've always been very vocal about. And they said, would you like to come work on some of our fairy tales? Which, of course, I mean, for a Disney fan, it's like a dream come true. So that's how I wound up writing for Disney and started doing some of the Twisted Tale books, which are just so much fun to do, to just do a new twist on a familiar story we already know and love.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then just for our audience, as you're hearing these answers and you have questions that you want to ask them, please put them in the Q&A box, and then we will be getting to those as well throughout there. And if you haven't read any of their books, you can definitely buy them from the Nowhere Bookshop. So that's actually one of the booksellers, or the book festival's bookseller. All right, Mary, how did you get into writing for Disney? What inspired you to say yes and write a Frozen book?
Well, so I had this book called The Camelot Code, which you mentioned earlier, that I was looking for a home for, and Disney had put out a call for books that have a mythology kind of basis, and it was around that time I was looking for a home for that book, and I was always a lifelong Disney nerd, and so I was like, oh, maybe Disney people will want it. And I had published many books before, but I'd always kind of in the back of my head thought it would be cool to write for Disney. And they have another publishing house, Disney Hyperion, who does books that are not necessarily tie-ins to their films and everything. They're just a separate book publishing company, like Rick Riordan, famous San Antonio writer. He's done kind of well, a little bit, pretty good with them.
Just a little bit.
With his Percy Jackson series. And so my agent sent in the Camelot Code, and they came back and they loved it, and they wanted to publish it as a series. And so I kind of got in the back door that way of writing for Disney, but not about Disney. And then I started to get to know my editor, and she found out what a total Disney nerd I was and looked at some of my Elsa cosplays that I had done over the years. And when this book came up, she was like, well, I think I have the obvious person who can write it. And so they were like, hey, do you have the bandwidth to write a Frozen book? And I was like, what is time? Yes, of course. Even though it was this tight deadline of like 2 months that they wanted this thing turned around, I dropped everything and got it done. And it's interesting because when they first said, oh, we want to have the book about the parents, this was before Frozen 2 had come out. And all I knew about the parents was like, they locked the kid up in the room and then they died. And I was like, who wants to read a book about them? And then I read the script for Frozen 2, and I'm like, oh, everyone wants to write a book about them. They have an amazing story. And so I was super excited to get to do that and to write that story.
Awesome. That's really cool. I didn't realize that you wrote your book about Frozen 2 before the actual movie for Frozen 2. I thought maybe the movie inspired you because you write a lot of little tiny scenes into your book that are later in the movie, which is cool.
So the way it worked is it was about a month or two before the movie came out that they hired me to write the book. So they had the final script at that point, and so I was able to read it. And then I was still working on the book when the movie came out. So like a book is sort of like an onion with many layers. And so as you're writing the rough draft, and then you go back and you fill in more and more. So as I had watched the film, many times at that point, I was just layering little Easter eggs and little things from the film. So I did have sort of the advantage of both. Unlike your next person you're going to ask this question
I know, because now I want to hear all about Camilla's journey. Camilla, you started with the Unicorn Quest trilogy, right? But you were an editor a long time before that. So how did you get involved with Disney?
Yeah, so I was a children's book editor, and then I started writing on the side, and now 2 years ago, I made the switch to writing full time. But for me, my agent got a call because some of the editors at Disney had read my series, The Unicorn Quest, which is about two sisters who find themselves in a magical world. And they thought that my voice and my depiction of sisterhood would be a great fit for Frozen. And I was like, yes, please, because I started thinking of the idea for Unicorn Quest around the time that Frozen came out. So for me, it was always kind of like Frozen allowed these big sister narratives to kind of take the stage. So I've always been really grateful to Frozen, and I love Frozen. So kind of like Mary, I got the call and they're like, do you have time? I was like, no, but there's no way I'm passing on writing about Anna and Elsa. And so another tight timeline, and the script wasn't completely finalized when I was handed it. So it was pretty cool because I got to see kind of how the story evolved. If you watch the documentary Into the Unknown, which is on Disney Plus, you'll kind of see some of those conversations, and I was able to be there and hear those conversations. And the deleted scenes were shared with me because the creators loved them so much, but there was no room for them in the movie, so I got to play with that. And some of the deleted songs I had access to, and if you know your Frozen 2 very well, you'll see some lyrical nods to some of the deleted scenes also in the book.
Yes, I did. I noticed that because I also watched the behind the scenes Into the Unknown docuseries. I thought that was fascinating. So I'm a little bit jealous that you actually got to be in on that.
It was cool.
Can I just say how jealous I am that the two of you got the script? I did not get to look at the script, and I had to write mine really fast too beforehand. And even though mine was like a twist on Frozen 1, there were parts of things I was coming up with, and then I would get a note like, "Well, you can't do that with the parents," and I'm like, "Why? Does something happen in Frozen 2 someone wants to tell me about?" And they're like, "We can't tell you anything." And I remember at one point I needed a map of Arendelle, and my editor sent me half a map because she couldn't show me the other half. And I remember, Camilla, I think you and I were talking about it at an event, and you had seen the whole map, and I was like, they wouldn't let me see the other side of the map. I didn't know what was over there. I had no idea. You know, as a fan, you want to know everything. So.
But Disney is so incredible. They have their editors just know everything about Frozen. And so even though we don't always get to see the whole picture and different parts, you know, we know different things, it's always so consistent. They work so hard on it. And they're the librarians of Arendelle. They know everything.
All of it. That's awesome. That is, yeah, I'm really jealous like you, Jen. I'm like, as a fan, to be able to have that behind the scenes peek, like, that would have been really incredible. Because I was very excited when Frozen 2 came out. I know that when I was asked to do this, I was like, oh, an excuse to watch the Frozen movies again. You know, not that I really need one, but I did. And then after each one of your books, I had to watch them again because, you know, you just do. So I think I ended up in the last month watching them like 4 times. But when you guys are writing the books, how many times did you actually end up watching the Frozen movies to prepare? And Camilla, you have a big smile and kind of a guilty secret. So
honestly, it was on loop constantly. And I also had the Broadway soundtrack on constantly because the Broadway soundtrack has even like more little details that you can include. So just I've lost count of how many times I've seen the movies, and I still watch them. It's not like I stopped watching them after the book was done. Like they're
right.
Still enjoyable.
Absolutely. Jen, how about you? I know you're kind of more of a veteran with writing for Disney because you at least had Mirror Mirror under your belt. Did you be like, oh, I know Frozen, no need to watch?
And oh my God, I love Frozen. I watch it all the time. And I have, you know, I'm the only girl in a household of boys. And like the kids just came home and they just got used to the fact that my boys got used to the fact that Frozen was on all the time or playing in the car. Or, you know, like I just was obsessed, but I can remember 1 or 2 times, this was pre-pandemic, we were writing, and I would write at Panera Bread, and I would have like Frozen on YouTube playing while I was writing a scene, because with the twist, I was like twisting around the story. So I wanted to like look at like little nuances of the scene, and people would just like walk by this grown woman watching Frozen at Panera Bread and think, what the heck is she doing? And I wanted to be like, I'm working. I'm really working. This is for work. But, you know, I loved it.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And Mary, how about you? I mean, I see some Elsa dolls behind you, so I assume you're a big fan as well.
I was a fan before I got hired to write the book. Like I said, I had cosplayed Elsa with my friend who cosplays Anna. We've done all sorts of mashups of Frozen cosplays. But yeah, Frozen 2 had so when it did come out in the theater, I didn't have a copy at home. And I had the script, but there are certain things. I'm a very visual person. I used to work in TV, so everything is like I have to see it. And so I would keep going to the movies. And luckily I have a 9-year-old. She was you know, and she was 8 at the time, and she wanted to come with me every time. So I always had a little movie buddy, which seems good until you realize 8-year-olds can't sit through a movie without having to go to the bathroom. And so I'm like, we get to the shipwreck scene. She's like, I have to go to the bathroom. I'm like, there's like 10 minutes of the movie that are like very vitally important for the parents. And like, that was one of them. And I'm like, you can't go. And I was like, Okay. But I was so happy when it came out on Disney Plus when I was doing the edits and I was able to have it on my computer and, kind of do both things at once. But for all that original stuff, I had to kind of memorize as I was watching it in my head what it looked like. Because there's a couple scenes that are actually at least one scene that's from Frozen 2, that's literally like word for word, but with the parents' thoughts when they're doing the bedtime story. So I had to get everything right because I know the fans know every last detail, and it's very important to me to do them service by not getting it wrong. And things can slip through if you're not really paying attention, and so I didn't want that to happen.
Yeah, I can understand. And you did a good job. There were actually things that I read in your book that I missed in the movie, even though I'd seen it multiple times. And when I went back because of your book, I was like, oh, it was right there in front of me. And it was a 5-second clip and you made it a whole scene in your book and it was incredible. So that was really awesome.
Yeah, like the Little Mermaid, when he's reading Little Mermaid, that's like a good
That's
example.
the one part.
And,
yeah.
Yeah. And first I was like, maybe he's reading the Snow Queen, but then I looked it up and I asked the filmmakers and everything. There's Little Mermaid, which is obvious now that I really can see the video and look close. But again, if you're only seeing it in the theater for a split second, you might not realize. Right. And so then we expanded on that and made it a whole scene, which was very fun.
Which was a lot of fun. And then I have another question for Jen. Jen, I love fractured and kind of twisted fairy tales, and now you've written 3. So can you tell us a little bit about why that specific genre kind of appeals to you? Maybe how did you get this question of, what if Anna and Elsa didn't meet? Like they're sisters. Like it just was a really interesting question. Can you tell us a little bit about your inspiration there?
Well, I mean, that, funnily enough, I did pick the twist for Mira Mira and I did pick the twist for Hercules, which just came out. But with Conceal Don't Feel, just like Camilla and Mary, I wrote it in a really short timeline. I think I had 2 months because Disney wanted to do it and they wanted it to come out before Frozen 2 came out. And so the filmmakers actually had a say in that twist. And they were the ones who thought, what if Anna and Elsa never knew each other? And so then I really had to think about it for a minute. How would that happen? They're sisters. So in what kind of world would they not know each other existed? And I thought, well, if magic had a hand in it, and they had to forget each other existed to preserve both of their existences, then to keep them both alive, then that would make sense. So that's I approached it that way. But it was fun nonetheless because, like Camilla and Mary, I love the story. The thought of getting to play around with who winds up with who's courted by who knows who when, and what each person's role is was just too much fun to not tackle.
And you did a great job. There were a couple of scenes that were straight from Frozen 1, but they were flipped or twisted. And it was a whole different character doing it. And I was like, I remember this. I can visualize it from the movie, but it had just the complete different characters in that scene. So you did an amazing job with that.
Thank you.
Yeah. What was the most fun to write of that twisted tale? When you twist the story,
it's fun because I got to tell it from Elsa and Anna's point of view, but I also got to tell it from Hans and Kristoff's point of view. I didn't go so far as to give Olaf his own point of view, but he's in the book. But getting to write a Hans chapter, it's just so delicious getting to write the villain, you want to dive into that.
Yeah, I can see that. And I really liked your little Hans backstory. I was like, oh, okay. That kind of just a little bit more than you've ever gotten in the movies, which is awesome.
Thank you.
Well, and Camilla, in your story, you also focus on the sisters in a different way, but your main character is Anna. Pretty much a lot of the story is told from Anna's point of view. Do you have a favorite Anna or Elsa?
Do I have a favorite? So I feel like I'm more of an Elsa. I'm more introverted. I'm an older sister. So, I just feel like this responsibility to my little siblings. But Anna, she's such a hero. She is such a real person. She has so many big fears and worries. So I just admire and adore Anna so much. And it was an absolute joy to kind of go into this very extroverted character who is so brave. But if you pay attention to Frozen 2 and the movies and the songs, she has a lot of self-doubt and she's very nervous. And so it was really interesting to be able to kind of go into her psyche and write about Anna and write this brave but insecure character and kind of play around with that. So Yeah.
Did you draw from like people that you know in real life to add those character elements to Anna when you were writing? Like,
So
was there an inspirational character?
Well, there's Kristen Bell. So I listened to a gazillion interviews by Kristen Bell and her talk about mental health and how she felt. And I knew that the directors of Disney really relied on Kristen to shape the character of Anna. So I kind of used her to get that voice that Anna has. And then, myself, I, have anxiety issues and I worry about things. So that did definitely play a role. And it was interesting because I was told by the directors, that she just really wants to be musical and she loves her home so much. So I was able to listen to the lyrics of the song Home and I Seek the Truth and kind of use those to influence the character of Anna that you see. And because it's just from Anna's point of view, you really get to see Anna in a whole different way than you normally get to. And that was really fun to put back those layers.
Would you and Anna from your book be BFFs? Would y'all be friends?
Yes, absolutely. I would rely on her to take me on all the adventures with her. I mean, she's someone you want to be friends with. She is so warm and caring. How can you not adore Anna? Like, she is just the best.
That's what I thought when I read your book too, and I just wasn't sure like which way you would go. Like, because I'm an older sibling as well, so I can see those ties to being Elsa and wanting to have the magic powers and all that. But yes, there's something very inviting about Anna and her humanness. Yeah.
You want Anna, like if you're having a bad day, it's Anna you want at your side.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Mari, I know you're a big Frozen nerd and Disney nerd, and so am I. And we talked about it and hinted at it, but I watched the behind the scenes intro a little bit into the Frozen 2 movie, and it was really interesting that they struggled a lot with that big song, the Show Yourself song, and how it was going to lead. When you're writing, do you have moments like that too, where it's like there's something crucial, but it's actually like one of the most difficult things for you to write? Like, what did you kind of struggle with in your book, or did you? Maybe you just
no,
flowed.
definitely. The hardest scene definitely to write was the one where Iduna finally tells Agnarr after all these years the truth about herself, and that is something that we don't see in the film. So it was all up to me and to explain it. And how do you tell someone that you love, who loves you, and that you've been lying to them since you were a little girl, and yet they are going to forgive you for this lie and understand why you did it? And pulling that all together in one chapter where you just have to smash them together and be like, here's how it is, and now we're going to go save Elsa. And that was a really, really difficult scene to write, and to make sure that she's giving enough information, but not too much that the reader gets bored, and then Agnarr has to respond and be surprised and, a little bit, taken aback, obviously, but still can come around and love her and tell her he understands and that it wasn't her fault, and that, she was put in an impossible situation, and they're going to move forward and they're going to use the information they have to save Elsa. That was a really, really tough scene to get right, and I rewrote it like 100 times. I was still rewriting it till like the very last night I turned in the book. I kept, reading it over and changing little bits of it, but I am happy with how it came out in the end. So I wouldn't change it now. I think it works, and I was happy with it, but it was a tough one to do. And when I was doing the outline of the book originally, I kept trying to get her to tell him earlier. I was like, she should just tell him right before the wedding, or she should just tell him here, or how about she tells him and then the trolls erase their memory, and then they find out, that they don't know, but then they do. I had every single scenario under the sun, and the filmmakers were like, no, there is a set point in time, you cannot change that. This is when she tells him right before they get on the ship. And it was really hard to figure out how to make that work and to keep her secret, because, you've read books where people have some dumb secret, and then, like, if you just had a conversation, all of this book would be over. And they didn't want it to be like that. So every moment in the book, I had to up the stakes of, like, if she told, she would die. If she told, the Kingdom of Arendelle would be, in danger. If she told, Agnarr would be in danger and his rule. And then that would throw, so we just had to keep upping the stakes to the point where she just couldn't tell him until she did.
Until the end, yeah. Which actually, I think that's really interesting that was, such a difficult scene to write, because it is one of my favorites. I mean, I think you did it beautifully. I would never have known you rewrote it 100 times, because it does. It flows very seamlessly. So nice job.
Thank you.
Well, and then Jen, when I was reading your books, one of the things that I really loved with yours is you did switch between all these different voices. Like you said, you got to be Hans for a little bit, and you got to be Kristoff, and you got to do Anna and Elsa. What is the value of doing that? Like, how do you get into like each character's head? Like, how do you write that? Is it a powerful writing tool to be able to switch? Because a lot of books I read, it's just one character's perspective, right? And then interacting with others. But you actually have so many different voices.
I mean, in the Twisted Tale books that I've done, at least, I know not every Twisted Tale, because there are 3 authors who work on the Twisted Tale books right now: Liz Braswell, Elizabeth Lim, and myself. Not everybody switches point of view, but I felt like for the stories I've told, it kind of made sense because, with Frozen, I wanted to know, the way it starts out, Elsa is alone in the castle. She thinks she's an only child. So you want to know her thoughts and feelings. But then where is Anna? Why doesn't Anna remember who she is, and where is she? Then I wanted to switch to Anna's point of view. So I just kind of knew I needed both of them. And then I thought, well, this is so much fun. I kind of want to pull in more voices. I want to know what Hans is thinking, what Kristoff is thinking, and how this story is going to work. The only thing is, like Mary, I think I work very visually. And so when you're plotting out a story where multiple people are telling the story, you really want to figure out who's saying what, when, and how it's going to push the story forward. So I always work with like a vision board and plot out those things before I start writing so that I can keep everything tracking well.
Which actually was going to be kind of my next question. Like, how did you begin to write these books? Camilla, do you also have like a vision board that you chart out? Are you?
Yeah, no, I'm someone who outlines stories a lot. So I outlined everything. I have Post-it notes going on to keep track of things. I also have Pinterest, so I pulled together a lot of Scandinavian art to kind of be and fan art of Frozen to have the visuals while I was writing. You kind of want the atmosphere surrounding you, for me at any rate.
And you actually, in your books, Camilla, you did a lot of mythological elements. I feel like
Yes.
with yours, you have like the main, Nightmare. I think you have the Holderfolk, if I'm saying that right.
Yes.
Yeah, and just a lot of these mythical stories in yours. Did you do a lot of research to prep for that, or?
I did do a lot of research. One of the first things I was told about Frozen 2 was Frozen and Anna represent fairy tale, while Elsa and Frozen 2 was going to represent myth. So the very first thing that I did was research what is a myth. And myth is stories that kind of tell humans their place in the natural world. And then so I went into a deep dive of Scandinavian lore, and I pulled out the Natmara, who, they all kind of look different depending on who's telling the story. Sometimes the Natmara are women, sometimes they're skeletal horses, and oftentimes they're associated with werewolves. So I kind of pulled on that theme, and they turn into black sand. So I used that. And with the Holderfolk, that was something that Disney specifically told me they wanted me to include, and that Iduna would tell stories about the Holderfolk. So I made sure to include them, and I kind of based them a bit off of the Holderfolk that you would see in the Broadway version of Frozen, where they replaced the trolls with the Holderfolk. So I took the elements of the myth that were helpful for my story, but added a little twist here and there, so they would be totally at home in Arendelle. So I love
which
myth.
you did great. I loved it. You go underground with them, and I was like, oh, this is a whole new character, or like group of characters to get to know. So it really added another layer, I think, to the Frozen mythology. So you did a beautiful job with that. I really enjoyed that. Yeah. Mari, you, like I said, you went to the past with yours. You talked about, Iduna, you talked about Agnarr, you went backwards in time. Did you enjoy having to kind of go back, or were you kind of sad that you didn't get to write about Anna and Elsa as kind of grown-ups the way Camilla and Jen did?
Both. I think I really love prequels just in general as a person. I've always been that kind of person who loves when an author does a prequel and you get to learn about the world before. So that was a natural fit for me. And it was so fun to be able to tie in things from the present and weave them into a reverse mythology, basically, of like, oh, want to know where Conceal, Don't Feel came from? Well, here you go. Here's the origin story of that. And so what happened to Agnar's mother? Well, here's the origin story of her. And so I really enjoyed being able to take things that happened in the present and give them like a purpose and a reason of why everything turned out as it was. So that was really, really fun. That said, I mean, I love Elsa and Anna, and I would love to write more. I got to put them a little bit in the end of the book, Elsa being born, and then them as children very shortly. And then the one scene where Elsa was in her room and Iduna was trying to comfort her, and she was just a torn up mess at that point. And that was a really hard scene to write because it was so sad. I cried when I was writing it. So yeah, I would love to write in the future, post Frozen 2, more adventures of them. And I would love to write about Olaf because I didn't get to use Olaf at all. So that would have been fun.
Yeah. Well, I think that's amazing. So I have just one or two more questions from me, and then we're going to start taking questions from the group, the audience that's watching with us, who are, hopefully enjoying all these kind of subtle looks of how you wrote and how Disney kind of played and helped you guys write these amazing stories and your inspiration for them. So again, if anybody in our audience who's with us today has questions for our wonderful authors, you can post them in the Q&A. And if you haven't read them and you're now excited to dive into these books, you can also buy these books from Nowhere Books, who is connected, I think their site is connected to the San Antonio Book Festival's main page. So you can go there and buy any and all of these books. And I suggest that you actually purchase all three because they are all amazing, all very different, and all equally wonderful in diving you into the Frozen world. Jen, I had a question for you. You've been writing, and when I saw that you had written 30 books, like 30, I was like, wow, how do you do that? Like, how do you sit down? What does your space look like? Like, what is your writing process? What are your favorite snacks? Do you listen to music? Like, how do you write a book?
I'm not actually in my office. I'm in my husband's office. I feel like we have multiple offices in the house now with everybody home in the pandemic. But those are my books I published on the bookshelf there. I used to enjoy working from home alone, and I had done that for like 15 years. And then the pandemic happened, and then all of a sudden everybody was working from home. My husband, my kids were virtual. So I feel like I've had to change this process a little bit, but I normally like music playing. Like when I was working on the Frozen book, I'd like the soundtrack going, although sometimes I would be singing along and I couldn't concentrate. I try not to work in the kitchen because otherwise when I get really stressed about a scene, all I want to do is eat, which doesn't work out well for me. And so I work really well in a quiet house in the morning. So again, with the pandemic, sometimes that works out, sometimes it doesn't. Ladies, I mean, you agree, you're all moms too, you have kids, like sometimes you got to work around your kids' schedules.
Yeah, definitely. It's been an interesting thing having my daughter home until recently, doing homeschool. But one of the greatest things was I actually wrote a book this winter where every day I would write a chapter and I would polish that chapter. And then at lunchtime, I would read it to my daughter, who's the target audience, being 9 now. And she would be like, I love this. This is the best book I've ever heard. And I was like, yes, okay. And then it would encourage me to keep going. And then every time I didn't have a chapter ready, she'd be annoyed at me. And so I wrote the book really quickly. And I actually sold it. I can't tell you, the deal is still happening, but it's actually going to be a real book. And I'm going to have to dedicate it to her because, even though she was home all the time and it changed my process, it actually enhanced my process in the sense. And then I had a willing audience member to read as I was going and help me do it.
We need your daughter, I think, to keep us on track. I need her to crack the whip so I get all my work done.
Plus, she makes really good smoothies, so that's another bonus.
Ooh, I like that.
That's fantastic. Well, how do you guys celebrate when you finish a book? What do you do at the end? You've written it, you said it. What is your personal celebration ceremony, I guess? Camilla?
Oh, I mean, mine was I would sleep the entire day after I finished it because I ended up writing Forest of Shadows and the last book in my Unicorn trilogy in the same time frame. And I was also an editor at a publishing house at the same time, and I was editing a 1,000-page book. So it was a bit wild. So I remember finishing Forest of Shadows, and then I gave myself the next day to sleep as long as I wanted. And that was pre having a daughter, though. So I don't I'm gonna have to. I haven't finished a book with my daughter around yet, so I'll have to probably change that up. We'll see what the new tradition is.
And Jen, what do you do when you finish a book to celebrate?
It depends. I think like Camilla, like I just need to power down for a little bit after that. I feel this like sense of relief, a sense of accomplishment. I definitely want to celebrate. And then it's sometimes it's really good. I don't know if you guys would agree, like to have that space between a first draft and a second draft to just kind of process everything, kind of figure out where you're going to go next and how you can make the story better. And sometimes I'm just so happy to have that first draft done. I just feel a huge sense of relief. But when you're finished, I don't know, sometimes it's very emotional. Like you've been working on something for so long, you're so attached to the characters, especially when it's somebody like Anna and Elsa. I'm sad to see it go. It's like sending your kids off to college and I haven't done that in real life, but it feels very emotional, like to say goodbye to them for a bit.
Yeah. Does your books usually change a whole lot between first and second drafts, Jen?
Oh, yes. Thank God. I mean, they get better, I hope. I hate the first draft. I just hate every first draft. I'm always like, what am I doing? Is this good? Is it bad? I don't know. Did I do this well? I like feedback. I think as a former magazine editor, I thrive off like feedback, and I feel like notes help me get better. What about you guys? Do you feel that way?
I'm a polish as I go kind of person. So by the time I'm done, when I write the end of the book, it's pretty much done. I mean, I like enough to pass in. So because I can't go too far out. I'm not a plotter. I had to plot very tightly for the Frozen book because the editors and the filmmakers had to approve everything. And it actually went really well, and I probably should do that all the time. But a lot of times when I'm writing a book, I'm like, I know what's going to happen next right after I write what happened previous, and I have to go along with the story as I'm writing it. And so I can only go so far out, and then I have to go back and polish and kind of refresh myself on it, and then I can move forward a little bit more and go back again. And it's a terrible process, but it's the only one that works for me.
I've been experimenting for myself, so I feel like I'm overtrained almost as an editor, so I have a really hard time turning the editorial side of my brain off, and I have a hard time kind of getting out that first draft. I way prefer revision. Like Jen, I really love feedback. I love critique. Like I don't want like a 1-paragraph edit letter. Give me like 15 pages of notes. That's what I want. Frozen and my last 2 books were not the most fun process because I felt like basically there was only time for 1 draft, so that's kind of what had to be published. But my favorite process is to write that first draft, give it space to breathe, and then come back and fix it. The second book that I wrote, there was a nice like 6-month chunk before I had to do the second draft, and it totally changed, and it surprised me. And I think you're not supposed to have favorites, but it might be my favorite because I was able to take that break and like really rethink it. So ideally, there's a huge change between first draft and second draft.
Well, we're going to take some questions from our audience who are actually I have quite a few of them, so we're going to see how many we can get through. The first question is from Tommy, and Tommy asks, what was the hardest part of writing your Frozen books? And I know, Mari, we kind of talked on it for your particular one, but Camilla or Jen, what do you think? Hardest part of writing?
For me, the hardest part of writing, it was also probably the most fun, was just the fact that the movie was still in process while I was writing my book. So I'd write something and then I'd get an email being like, we need help on, script has changed, and like, rewrite. So that was probably the hardest. But again, it was really fun because each version got better and better.
Yeah, it was fun knowing that the filmmakers were weighing in on everything. So like sometimes I would get a note about like a piece of Olaf dialogue, like, this is cute, but I don't know if Olaf would say that. And I'd be like, oh, they read it. I was like always so excited when I knew the filmmakers were reading things and like how I could like make an Olaf line better or something like that. So I loved the idea that it was, this big picture thing that more people were like having their hands on the story.
And Mari, Mary, I'm sorry. The next question is for you. It's actually from Catherine, though she says Camilla and Jen can weigh in as well. But for Mary, Catherine wants to know, do you have any regrets at all when writing your retrospective books, especially in the timeline of the story?
I'm not sure what that means. Can you explain?
I think they want to know, like, I think maybe we touched on this earlier, like if you had any regrets at all when you were writing, like, you know,
like something I wrote that I wish wasn't
something
in the
like
story?
like a prequel, maybe. Yeah. I'm not sure. I can read it again.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll try to answer. But if, you know, in the chat, if you want to explain a little bit more of what you mean, I feel like the story is very tight. And so, and one of the things that filmmakers and editors really wanted was to concentrate on the teen years of Iduna and Agnarr. And I've seen people say, oh, I wish there was more this young of them, or I wish there was more Elsa and Anna stuff at the end. It's like, I wish that too. I would want the book to be 1,000 pages long, you know, and I would love to have every single scene of every single thing that happened to them from, you know, them 12 years old and meeting 12 and 14 and then all the way to their death. But obviously we had to make choices of what could be included. And I think that was the hardest part. Not that I regret that those scenes aren't in there, but I think that I would have loved to explore a few more things and made the book longer, but we had to keep it under a certain amount of word count. In fact, we went over, they wanted it 70,000 words, and I think we got up to 81. So we squeezed in a few more scenes in there. No, I guess that's the best answer I can give on that, probably.
Well, Tommy also asked, and again, this is for Mary, would you be interested in writing post-Frozen 2 books? And where would you take the characters?
Yes, and I would take the characters wherever they asked me to take them. Unfortunately, that is one thing we don't get a say in, is to say what we want the books to be about. The filmmakers clearly have a good handle on their world, and we love that too. And like, that would be something that they would tell us what they want the story to be, and then we can take off and go from there. And it's not that we don't have any creativity allowed. You know, I made up so much stuff to the lore and Dangerous Secrets that wasn't there, and I was like, what about this? And they were super like open to being like, oh, that's a great idea, yes, do that, and more than I thought it would be. But you know, at some point they're going to have whatever plans they have, and we need to fit in the parameters as hired writers. Now, where I want them to go, I would love to see what everyone else wants to see. I want to see a Kristoff and Anna wedding. I want to see, you know, future adventures, whether they are, you know, through the big storyline or just little adventures. I actually wrote a short, which I think some people were referring to on the chat, where it was just this one little scene of Iduna and Agnarr on their wedding anniversary, and how the kids kind of were mischievous and got involved and sort of messed everything up. And so that was fun to write. There's just a little scene, and it doesn't play into the huge story, but it's just like kind of like the X-Files when they do the Monster of the Week episodes, and they're not part of the whole mythology, but like they're just a fun adventure. So, you know, that kind of thing would be great for a book, like Forest of Shadows. You know, it's just a fun adventure with Elsa and Anna.
Yeah, very cool.
I mean,
how about
Mary
you, Jen?
and I sometimes actually just for fun will like text each other, like, can you imagine if this happened in Frozen? Or like sometimes I'll be out jogging and then I'll text her because I have an idea, and I'm like, or if Kristoff did this, like, we're always thinking about Frozen.
Yeah, we have all these wild theories and ideas. So,
Millie, you need to get in on this action.
She's been
a new baby.
I know.
I've been very pregnant and out of the loop, but I mean, I always think about them all the time, and I've read both Mary's and Jen's books because, I mean, I love the world, and like I said, I still watch the movies. I rewatched the Into the Unknown documentary recently, like 3 weeks ago, because I was, you know, up late at night. What else is there to do but watch more Frozen things?
I can understand that. Well, we have a question from Catherine, and maybe, Jen, you can start us off, but all of you can definitely answer. Do you have any advice to aspiring authors?
I mean, I would say read as much as you can and write as much as you can. It's simple as that. I think a lot of times, so many of us say, oh my gosh, I have this great idea, but then we never actually sit down and write it. And I think the hardest thing for a writer to do sometimes is actually sit down and write. There is like this running joke that so many writers have, and we talk about it all the time. Like, we'll be like, my book is due today, so I'm mopping the kitchen floor. Like, you want to do anything but actually finish good job, because it can be really hard, but it's also so satisfying. So just sit down and start writing, and don't worry so much about where it's going. Just practice your craft. That would be my advice.
Camilla, what do you think?
Yeah, so along with writing and reading, I'll go a little deeper on reading. Read a lot of different things. You don't have to just read like one genre. I read science fiction, science books, history books, and the reason why I really recommend this is because you read all these different things, all these inputs get twisted, like muddled around and twisted in your mind, and you make connections that only you can make because you're the only one who's read that information in that specific way. And so I think that's one way to really get your creativity going. And then, yeah, don't wait for tomorrow to write your story. Just write today, and it doesn't have to be your story. It could just be what you did this morning. Just the repetition of it can help you break that fear of the blank page. Or I had that fear of the blank page.
I understand that. Mary, do you have anything that you would want to say to aspiring authors?
Yeah, I would say a lot of people write and they're so excited about the end goal that they don't enjoy the process. So don't think so much about someday I'm going to be published by Disney or whoever. Someday I'm going to see my book on the shelf. I mean, it's not that you can't dream of those things, but don't let that take away from the joy of actually crafting a story, because that's going to be shown on the page. So many people now, especially with self-publishing, which is a completely legit, wonderful way to get published, but there's not like a lot of like, I have to, like I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to hone my craft, I have to make it, a certain way to get to the point where it's ready to either go up self-published or be with a traditional publisher. They're in such a rush, and they think there's this myths I see on Twitter all the time, like if you're 30 and you're not published yet, you're basically a loser and it's never going to happen for you. And I promise you that's not true. And writing, that's one of the great things about writing, is you can be any age. And so don't rush it and don't destroy the process and then just be in a rush all the time because you're so anxious to be published. Enjoy your story, because I promise you, once you are published, you're always going to have deadlines and it's going to be awful. So enjoy that first book where there's no deadlines and you can take your time and craft those characters and fall in love with the story and really tell it the best way you can. Every author, their first book, they go back to it and they cringe a little. They're like, oh, so just make sure that first book is as good as possible. So 10 years later, you don't have to go back and be like, ugh,
I can understand that. Well, Jen, the next question is from Maggie towards you. She wants to know if there's any more twisted tales on the horizon.
The next twisted tale coming out is from Liz Braswell, and it's the Rapunzel one, and I'm trying to remember the title. Do either of you remember it? What Once Was Mine, I think it is. It's got a gorgeous cover.
But I'm super excited for it.
That's the next one that's been announced. I do know something coming, but I can't talk about it yet. But it's there's always so much great twisted tale stuff going on. I mean, it's fun to see how much people like those books, so I can't wait to see what they come up with next.
Yeah. And do you have a next one from your Reform School series coming up?
I actually have a new series with Disney, which is middle grade, which starts in September. It's the Lost Legends series, and it will focus on different young Disney heroes around the age of 12. They're stories we haven't seen before. So the first one is the Flynn Rider origin story. It's all about 12-year-old Eugene Fitzherbert. I'm sorry. Oh my God. And he is growing up in an orphanage, and his best friend is Arnwaldo Schnitz, who people might know from the Tangled TV show. And I just can't wait for people to see Flynn. It was, oh my God, so much fun writing it.
That sounds like a lot of fun, actually. Well, this next question is, it's a lot of questions. So let's see if I can get this. This is actually from Dinosaur Zhao. Hopefully I'm saying that right. And they're asking, in the epilogue of Dangerous Secrets, so this is for you, Mary, before Iduna and Agnarr were lost in the dark sea, Iduna used the voice to call out one last time. So who was she calling in this occasion?
You don't know, do you? I always say I'm not allowed to talk about what's not on the page because that wasn't approved, unfortunately. So we only know from her point of view, and that's where the story ends. If I was to pontificate on it, not in a factual canon kind of way, but just in my own head, I feel like she's calling out to Atta Holland in one last ditch effort. But I think that at that point she knows that she will never see Atta Holland, and that it's up to her daughters to take on the mantle. It was very hard. I actually came up with the idea of framing the book with the shipwreck before I started writing it, and then after I did, I love how it works, but it was so hard to write because it was so sad, and I was bawling at the end of the book every time I would edit and go over it again. And you know, now people are like, basically, you owe me therapy bills, you know, because I did this to them. But yeah, I mean, I wanted it to have both a sad and both an uplifting ending at the same time. And so to show Iduna the last moments with full of some kind of peace that she finally found inside herself, knowing that she played her role, and now it's up to her two daughters to take on and go from there.
Yeah. And then I think a follow-up to that,
Mary.
It was, and I used to love those books when I was little. Jen said it was heartbreakingly good.
Oh.
Yeah. There's a couple of follow-up questions to that. Again, they wanted to know, is this the exact call Elsa heard in Frozen 2? Or was that call Elsa heard actually being the one Iduna used when she called Gale to save Agnarr during the Battle of the Dam?
I think that's something that's open to fan interpretation, and I would not be qualified to speak on that. Sorry.
Fair. That's
Sometimes
okay.
we're a little bit muzzled, and it's hard because, you know, we aren't allowed to just create the lore and blab it off in a panel. Everything we do on the page is approved and has to go through multiple channels. And so, you know, I don't need Jen Lee being like, you're not writing for us anymore because you like made up all this stuff, and now Frozen 3, if they were doing it, you know, like isn't going to work because Mary said something on some panel. So
Frozen 3.
I know. I hope Frozen 3 happens.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. I got a little bit heartbroken at the end of Frozen 2 because Elsa kind of says, nope, no more adventures. And I was like, please don't be. No, there has to be a Frozen 3. One of the questions we got was, do you listen to your own audiobooks? Camilla?
I did, because the actress who plays Honey Marin read mine, and I think Jen's as well. And it was just really cool to have the actress play. And I think Mary has a really interesting story about hers.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely listen. It's weird listening to your audiobook. I'm not going to lie. And for normal books, I sometimes don't, because it is very odd. And if you're just feeling nervous, you feel a little anxious about like if they're going to read it right, especially if you write humor, which I often do, and you know, are they going to hit the jokes right and all that. But for Dangerous Secrets, we had the actors from the film, you know, Evan Rachel Wood, who I'm a big fan of anyway, and Alfred Molina, actually do the audio. And the reason they were able to do that was because it was a first person. And so they almost didn't do the audio, or they did it in a different way where they would have had to switch the whole audio to third person, which would have been horrible. And everyone would have, you know, it would have been really weird. So they were like, oh, well, we can have the actual actors read it. And they agreed, thankfully. And it's just, they're so good. They're such good readers. And it was just a true honor to have them read the book. So I was still nervous listening to them read it, but I loved it at the same time.
How about you, Jen?
You know, I want to listen to Mary's now, because I was so excited when I heard what she was doing. I have listened to it before. I'm really lucky. I've had some wonderful audiobook readers, but it is weird to hear your own work. Like I kind of understand why actors are like, I don't watch myself in my movies. It feels strange to hear it out loud. And I know even when I've done like book signings in person, I'm always editing what I'm reading, like trying to make it better. So hard to have
absolutely. All right. Well, and then I think we had got a couple more questions come in, but one of the ones, I don't know who would be the one to answer this one. This one seems like it's a little bit more kind of behind the mythology. So maybe you guys are all know a little bit more, but it's from Stephen. And I think he's directing it to Mary, but if you think if anybody knows the answer. Are any details known about Rita Anna and Elsa's grandmother, like from which country she came from, or how old she was when she was married to Runyard, or any details about her features.
Well, I'm the one that, had her in my book.
Yeah.
There are no more details, and there were no details when I started writing about her. All the stuff that I came up with, they approved, but that was all from me. And they didn't even have a picture. I asked if there was like a portrait or a picture. There were some fans that thought a certain picture in the library was of her, and they said, no, that is not her. There is actually no picture of Rita. So we don't know a lot about her besides what was in Dangerous Secrets. So she's still much of a mystery.
Okay, very cool. I like it. All right. Well, we have about 5 minutes left. There are a few more questions that came in, but do you have anything that you guys want to say to our audience today? I know that they're probably huge, giant Frozen fans. I don't know if there's anything that you want to kind of hint at or talk to them about, or I can just ask another question. What would y'all prefer?
I mean, I always like to know, Mary and Jen, are you an Anna or an Elsa?
I am more of Elsa, and she's an Anna. We've discussed this. Yeah. So it works out well. Yeah, I definitely relate to Elsa. I have a lot of anxiety and have to kind of, push through all of that. So I definitely understand her, I think.
And Jen, you're an Anna?
Oh, Jen.
We lost you, Jen.
I think we lost your audio, Jen.
Oh, no.
I'm not sure. We'll see if we can get her back. Can't hear her. That's okay. We'll give you a moment to just see if you can reconnect, and I'll ask Kamilla one last fan question that came through. Do you think such a relationship of royal sisters is real in reality? Perhaps sisters in the real world would not be so close?
No, I think sisters can be that close. I mean, everyone has different relationship with their sister, but my sister, she's 7 years younger, and she's my absolute best friend in the world. And we're very different. I'm a writer. I'm kind of the wild artistic one, and my sister is studying to get her PhD in biology, but she's the person who I talk to the most. And again, even though there's 7 years between us, she's my best friend. So I do think it's possible for sisters to be as close as Anna and Elsa. I have it myself.
All right, Jen, are you back with us?
No.
That's okay. We are just about out of time.
I just wanted to say one thing. Since we didn't, there are some questions that are outstanding. We are all on Twitter. I imagine if you tweet us after this panel, we will get to we could probably give you some answers if you had anything left. But again, there's certain things we can't tell you. We'd have to kill you, but we will do our best to answer. So there was no killing. So feel free to find us there.
I am going to ask one last question. Since you all love Disney and I love Disney, and then I think Jen, if you type it in the chat, we can still see your answer. Who is your favorite Disney character of all time? You want to start, Camilla?
Of all time, I mean, that's so hard, but I had to say, in the last 2 years, I've just come to adore Rapunzel. I love Rapunzel so much. Anna and Elsa, obviously, big heart, but I just, the Tangled animated series, it's gold. Everyone should watch it.
That's awesome. Mary?
I'm going to go old school and say Pluto. I've always been a big fan of Pluto.
Very nice. Very nice. And then Jen says, I'm with Camilla. I adore Rapunzel. Yeah, I may be the most like Anna, but Tangled animated series is incredible. Yeah, that's one of my favorites to rewatch too.
Good. All the songs, amazing.
I know, I do love all of their songs. All right, well, we have just about a minute left, so I just want to remind you, if you have not purchased their books yet, to please go ahead and buy those from Nowhere Books. They're connected to the San Antonio Book Festival's website, so you can definitely do that. All three are amazing. You can have a romance, you know, about best friends with dangerous secrets written by Mari Mancusi. You can have a nightmare adventure quest with Kamilla Benko's Forest of Shadows. And then in Conceal, Don't Feel, you can ask that twisted question of what happens when Anna and Elsa don't meet and explore this kind of bond of sisterhood. And they were all really incredible books. So thank you to all of our authors for being here today. You were amazing. And thank you for the wonderful audience and all the questions that you guys submitted. We are really grateful that you joined us for the book festival today. And I think that's going to about wrap it up. So yay. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.